Imagine standing at the counter of your favorite local coffee shop. You have two things on your to-do list: buy a fresh latte and pay back a $10 IOU to your friend. But when it's time to settle up, you don't pull out your debit card. Instead, you reach into your pocket and pull out a handful of vintage gold coins. This brings up an interesting question. Can your friend refuse to take those gold coins for the old debt? And can the barista refuse them for the new coffee? You might assume the answer is exactly the same for both of them. But under the law, your friend and that barista actually have completely different rights when it comes to rejecting your payment. Figuring out why they have different rights uncovers a fascinating, often misunderstood dividing line. It's the invisible boundary between what a government can control by law and what the free market decides on its own. Let's start with your friend and that $10 IOU. This is where we run into the concept of legal tender. Legal tender is a specific government rule, and it only applies to settling an existing documented debt. Because you already owe your friend that $10, a formal debt exists. If you offer to pay them back using official US dollars, which are recognized as legal tender, they are legally required to accept it to clear the balance. If your friend refuses your cash because they'd prefer you pay in gold coins or maybe cryptocurrency, they lose their right to sue you for the money. A judge would look at the situation, see that you offered official legal tender, and throw the case out. That is the entire job of a legal tender law. It removes any guesswork from paying off past obligations, giving both borrowers and lenders absolute certainty about what counts as a finished transaction. Now, let's turn to the barista. When you order that latte, you aren't settling an old loan. You are proposing a brand new transaction. In the context of a new, voluntary trade, legal tender laws have zero power. The barista is under no legal obligation to accept your US dollars, your gold coins, or anything else. This is where we find the definition of money. Money is simply whatever you and the barista mutually agree to use to make the trade happen. That could be cash, a credit card swipe, or even trading a muffin for the coffee. People use money because it's useful and because they trust other people will accept it tomorrow. It emerges entirely from everyday agreement, not because a government passed a law forcing them to use it. So what happens to an economy when a government prints a legal tender, but the citizens completely lose trust in it? Look at Zimbabwe during the 2000s. The government mandated their local currency as legal tender for all debts, even as hyperinflation caused it to lose virtually all of its practical value. Despite strict laws requiring its use, citizens voluntarily abandoned the local bills. They couldn't rely on it to hold value overnight, so local markets simply ignored the mandate and switched to trusted alternatives, like the US dollar. This reveals a difficult reality for governments. They can use legal force to demand compliance for old debts, but no amount of legislation can force a population to accept a currency as functional money if the trust is gone. We can also see the exact opposite scenario playing out today with cryptocurrency. Here, we have a medium that millions of people voluntarily use for everyday trade, but it generally lacks official government recognition. Your local barista might gladly accept a digital transfer for your latte, but you cannot legally force a bank to accept it to pay off your mortgage, and you certainly can't use it to pay your federal income taxes. Because they miss out on the massive built-in demand that comes from nationwide debt settlement and annual tax collection, these alternative currencies tend to remain localized tools rather than dominant economic forces. This brings us to why the modern US dollar is such an economic superpower. It successfully combines both of these concepts into a single unified piece of paper. The government firmly enforces its use for settling debts and paying taxes. At exactly the same time, the broader market voluntarily trusts it as a reliable, convenient tool for everyday trade. When you pull those two ideas apart, you see how the system really works. Governments can write the laws to settle the debts of the past, but at the end of the day, it is the people's ongoing voluntary trust that ultimately powers the money of the future.